Elizabeth Warren, of course, new senator from Massachusetts, and her expertise is banking and keeping them in check. And it's a good thing because they're having a committee hearing in banking, housing, and urban affairs. And they have all the regulators in front of them, Ben. They've got the FDIC, the SEC, OCC, CFPB, CFTC, and just about every other letter there is.
The Fed, the Treasury, everybody.
Right. So she's going to ask what appears to be an incredibly simple question, and literally no one has an answer. This is awesome.
I want to ask a question about supervising big banks when they break the law. The question I really want to ask is about how tough you are, about how much leverage you really have in these settlements. And what I'd like to know is, tell me a little bit about the last few times you've taken the biggest financial institutions on Wall Street all the way to a trial. Anybody?
Anybody? Anybody?
Now,
literally no one had an answer as to when was the last time they ever took any of the big banks to trial. What they do always is settlements. Now, of course, the banks are like, hey, I made $100, I'll give you $20 of it, and we call it a day. That's a settlement. She's like, when's the last time you actually went to trial?
By the way,
nothing.
That's not the ratio, $100 and 20. It's like we made $586 million and we're settling for $72 million. I mean, they're dramatic.
Yeah.
But what I don't agree with you on is that she's just asking a simple question. Mm-hmm. She knew what question she answered. And
no, of course.
Right, I just want to make sure.
The devastating part of that question is its simplicity.
Right. Yeah.
Let's just look, not a big deal. Just, I'm sure you have a date. When's the last time?
2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever. Just let me know.
So she goes specifically to Thomas Curry next. He's the head of the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. They're supposed to be one of the top regulators of the banks. This is what happens.
We primarily view the tools that we have as mechanisms for correcting deficiencies. The primary motive for our enforcement actions is really to identify the problem and then demand a solution to it on an ongoing basis.
That's right. And then you set a price for that. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to move this along. That's effectively a settlement. And what I'm asking is, when did you last take, and I know you haven't been there forever, so I'm really asking about the OCC, a large financial institution, a Wall Street bank, to trial?
The institutions I supervise, national banks and federal thrifts, we've actually had a fair number of consent orders. We do not have to bring people to in a trial or an
Well, I appreciate that you say you don't have to bring them to trial. My question is, when did you bring them to trial?
We have not had to do it as a practical matter to achieve our supervisory goals.
This is yeah, totally. But the
suplex.
How big an impact has Marco Rubio had on the world? I mean, these guys have like 28 bottles of water within quick striking distance.
She didn't have the regulators. Yeah. They had to go to those waters all the time.
Put the shot up there for 1 sec. Look at that. There must be 8 bottles of water within an easy arm's reach for Tom Curry. He doesn't even have to extend an arm. Look at 1, 2, 3, 4. They got glasses.
You know why? They said Elizabeth Warren up next in the questioning. They're like, somebody get the water.
I need water.
All right. So anyway, no. It's a very simple question. Yeah. When was the last time you took them to trial? Well, we feel like we didn't have to take them to trial. Oh, really, huh? And I'd love if she had asked a follow-up question. Now, where did you last work? And you know what I'm saying? Because almost all those people you worked either as lawyers or lobbyists or actual bankers for the financial industry. So now she's not done yet. Okay, she's going to go next to Elise Walter, who's the chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission. This is a very important regulator. Obviously, they must have taken some action.
We truly believe that we have a very vigorous enforcement program. We look at the distinction between what we could get if we go to trial and what we could get if we don't.
I appreciate that. That's what everybody does. And so the question I'm really asking is, can you identify when you last took the Wall Street banks to trial?
I will have to get back to you with the specific information, but we do litigate.
Stone cold stunner.
By the way, she wasn't even sitting next to the first guy. She had 4 glasses too. They were ready.
Okay, come on. They haven't gone to trial literally as far back as they can remember. No one had an answer. That's because they don't go to trial. They never hold these guys accountable, and that's exactly her point, and it is devastating.
And one of the great points that she made in the question was it's not just that it is not merely, or it ought not merely be a financial breakdown of how much it will cost to go to trial between your chances of winning and what, so if this were a reasonable conversation, if this were a conversation that was ultimately fair, that's a decision prosecutors make all the time. It may not be worth the risk of trial. We might not get a conviction. We'll take this settlement here. But what happens when you go to trial is you open yourself up to discovery. And there just becomes this mountain of evidence that you don't get when you make this settlement. And I think we edited it down. She mentioned that in her sort of opening remarks before she asked the question.
The person who mentions that often is Elliot Spitzer, because he was a guy who actually took them to trial. And then you discover all the things, their emails, their correspondence, and you get the evidence. And then if you're an actual prosecutor who cares to do their job, then you're going to go after the lower rung guys. They lead to the middle rung guys. They lead to the executives. Those are the guys making the decisions. And so that's how you do it if you actually wanted to take action against the banks. Now, one last thing she did here is a statement that's really important. Because they say, oh man, we did other things. I mean, we didn't have to take the trial, right? She said, but look at the contrast between what we do with the bankers and what we do with the little guys.
We've got multiple people here. Anyone else want to tell me about the last time you took a Wall Street bank to trial? You know, I just want to note on this. There are district attorneys and U.S. attorneys who are out there every day squeezing ordinary citizens on sometimes very thin grounds and taking them to trial in order to make an example, as they put it. I'm really concerned that too big to fail has become too big for trial. That just seems wrong to me.
For example, one of the people that she might be referring to is Aaron Swartz, whose funeral services that she went to.
One of her constituents.
Yeah, and he's a guy that had, according to the government, hacked into the private companies' files. In fact, the reality is he didn't hack into it. He had a contractual agreement with them. He might have violated the contractual agreement and downloaded too many documents, right? But they said, they requested, the government did 35 years in prison for that. Now, were they really going to send him to prison for 35 years? Probably not. But they threw the book at him. And they said, you could go up to jail for 35 years for violating a private contract on a terms of service. So her point is, if it's a little guy that has no power, you're perfectly happy to go to trial, and you do it all the time.
You mentioned power. What they did with Aaron Swartz was flex their prosecutorial power. That's what they do literally every day, 10 times a day in big prosecutors' office, federal prosecutors, state prosecutors. They flex their power, and they intimidate people. What they did not, what seems to me, and I'm sure you agree, to not happen one time, is they haven't flexed any power. They never intimidated. Instantly, this became a process of, all right, let's start haggling here, and we're going to settle up on it, and we're going to end up with a number and some activity that you have to participate in to make whole the people who were defrauded.
Right, and the point is, they want to make an example out of some people when it's a little guy, right? And they say, well, we had to do it so that other people understand the lesson. So what does it mean when they don't want to make an example out of the banks? What lesson do people learn? Well, the banks learned the lesson. It's going to be okay. At most, you're going to have to give a small percentage of your ill-gotten profits back to the government, but they're never going to make an example out of you. You're never going to jail, and go ahead and keep doing exactly what you're doing.